chapters and appendices, and a lot of people in this room have agreed to take a chapter. So thanks to you all. A lot of them are from the Parents Coalition, the Taxpayers League, and then just other people that were really, I appreciate the help, and we all appreciate the help. So I think we're going to reverse it. And just as a reminder to the people that are going through the budget, everyone has 8 minutes. And Peggy's going to be the timekeeper informally, just because otherwise we're never going to make it through all the chapters. We're going to reverse it, and Janice Sartucci from the Parents Coalition is going to go through the appendices first, and then I'll start with Chapter 1, K through 12 instructions, and we'll go through there. Okay, you're up. And if you want, if anybody who's presenting, you can use the whiteboard, and there's markers there.
The reason we're starting at the back is because the back has some really good stuff in it. And you kind of need some of the stuff in the back to figure out what's in the budget itself. I tried to get a hard copy of the budget, but they actually don't have it anymore. So they're only online, but this is about what it would look like. This is an old version. And so the appendix are at the back. And so I'll start with the first thing I think that's really important to know is that the Maryland state law says that the budget is the responsibility of the Board of Education. But in the last 10 years, the Board of Education has moved the process of setting the budget to a secret committee out of the public view. But years ago, it used to be that the board would sit at their public table and go through the budget page by page. So tonight, we're sort of simulating what we would like to see the board do again. And this is an article from 1981, when they talk about the board going through the budget page by page. So you can have about 25 copies of that. So that's the way the budget used to be put together. Now we don't have that. Now we have the BOE going through the budget and asking staff questions. But when they ask the questions, staff never gives an answer on camera. They give answers quietly later on that are posted to the MCPS website. And the board never takes those questions back and discusses the answers in public, which is fascinating. I found a really good example of one of the questions they asked on this current budget had to do with the textbook fund. So you'll see in the budget so much money for textbooks. And one of the board members, I don't know which one, it doesn't say, asked for the budgeted and actual textbook money from 2008 through 2013. And staff came up with a chart, and what you'll find pretty much on here is that they put in a certain amount of money, they don't spend it. Oftentimes we see textbook money after the budget is set moved to other categories in the budget, moved around. So this is a fascinating piece of budget information that never gets discussed at the board table, but can be found now on the MCPS website under budget questions. So I copied that for you. So that's one of the things that sort of stuck away. So now, just going to the actual appendix itself, it starts out with a calendar, which is straightforward. It is in Part B, it goes through administrative supervising salaries, operations salaries, business salaries, teacher salaries, so you can see what everybody makes. Part C of the appendix is probably one of the ones that is most important to look at because that's the state budget categories. And the state mandates that the school system put together the budget in a certain way and submit it to the state. And that's what the MCPS does. And pretty much they do the minimum that's required by law. So you don't get extra information in here typically. And so those state budget categories are listed in there. For example, one of the categories is fixed charges, which includes pensions and benefits. And you can look in Appendix C to this budget and see that in that category, the expenditure is up $20 million this year. In Appendix D, this is the one that parents really need to know about and find. Appendix D is the staffing guidelines. That will tell you how many music teachers you're going to get, how many librarians, how many classroom teachers you're going to get, and what kind of ratios are the guidelines. The problem with this is, if you ever go to challenge these guidelines, they are just, in fact, guidelines. The board hasn't actually voted on any of these numbers as specific mandated numbers, and so you're going to find that they're not followed necessarily. but it's important for discussion to start. So Appendix D this year is the one with all the staffing numbers. E is special education and related services. Again, the same idea, it goes through all the possible positions, but that's great for looking at to see what services are offered and what kind of staffing would be there. Again, we go back to the same problem, these are guidelines. You never see the Board of Education going through these documents line by line and setting these numbers, which would be, ideally, that's what you would expect your Board of Education to do. Unfortunately, all these decisions are being made by the secret budget committee that meets outside of the public purview. And I would suggest that those meetings are in violation of the Maryland Open Meeting Act, but we haven't challenged that just yet, but we will. Appendix F, this one is, and I don't know if I don't think I made copies of this for you all, but Appendix F is one of my ones that I love. It's non-operating budget positions. A few years back, and I don't know when this started, they started identifying that, well, not everybody's in the operating budget. This year, there are 138 positions that are not covered by the operating budget.
Did you define that?
Well, they're in the, I don't have the list in front of me, but
What does non-operating budget?
it means the capital budget is paying salaries for people. So basically, you've got 138 people, jobs that have been hidden over here in the capital budget, so when you're looking at the operating budget, you don't.
I think also if a position is funded through a private grant, that's considered.
But if you look at the list of what's over there,
Yeah.
it's quite.
It's supposed to be, I know that
It's
private,
the whole technology department, it's
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff is over there. So it's, I didn't do an analysis of it, but it's
Yeah.
gotten pretty
it's,
big
but
over the
it's,
years.
yeah, it was supposed to have been, one of the components was supposed to have been those positions that are funded exclusively by grants outside.
Right, I think we're over
Taxpayers.
that.
Oh,
Yeah. I think we're over that.
yeah,
So, yeah,
Can we ask a question?
yeah, I mean, I just have 8 minutes, so
Oh,
I'll
I'm
do
sorry.
my best.
The non-operating budget, you say these are paid out of the
Capital
capital?
budget, right.
Do they appear in the capital budget or they appear?
I don't think, I don't have a capital budget with me. I don't remember
That's sure.
seeing that in there. I think they're just listed as an appendix in the operating budget because they're people.
it's capitalized labor.
And usually in the capital budget, you just see all the
This one over the
capital.
fall up there, okay.
Yeah, I don't think they put it, but I could be wrong. But I didn't look at that to see. But that's a fascinating thing that's in there. G is one that I couldn't begin to touch. It's the reconciliation with the audit. Again, it's fascinating information for auditors and budget people. Then H is the glossary, which again, that's something that's going to be useful again back to parents and people that have a everyday interest in the school system. And you're looking at the budget. My favorite word in the glossary is realignment. That means cut. So when you see a department has had a realignment, that means they've had a cut. But they don't use that word because realignment takes up more space. So you've got some good words and definitions in your glossary that will help you get through the budget. And then lastly is the index for what's in the budget. This year, you might be familiar that the Parents Coalition, in an effort to search the budget, we discovered that we actually could not do a word search, even though you can't get the hard copy anymore, everything's online. The copy that the school system put online is not searchable with the computer. So we took that document, downloaded it. I don't know what we did to it, Lewis, but Lewis, Willen, and I made it searchable. So now you can search the entire budget for any particular word. For example, one of the interesting things we find in the budget this year is they're taking $40,000 from the field trip fund and shifting that over to artificial turf. Okay, I can't explain it, but it's in there. So anyway, so now you can, if you go to the Parents Coalition site, you can get a searchable copy of the budget and search it for individual words. One of the words I like to do is realignment. I started going through and just looking every time they're moving money. Where are they moving it? How much? Where is it going? And then back to the other example I gave you about the textbooks. That has always been a fascinating one because parents are constantly being told that there's not enough money. And yet you'll see that there's money that they don't spend on textbooks, and we often see money moved from the textbook category to another category at the county council. Thanks, I'm good, I'm done. And so you'll see often that the textbook money is being moved to something else, realigned. And, you know, parents, that's really something they should know, that the money that the board says they're gonna set aside in the budget, you can see on the chart I gave you, it doesn't make it to the textbooks that use basically. So, and that's a place for advocacy for parents, you know, spend money you're allocating on that, so. Okay, thank you.
Are there still shortages? I have been at meetings where parents spoke up about their kids not having textbooks. That's been happening.
I still get yelled at because I'm the person who said they can't charge for textbooks. So I will say that there's still a shortage of funds for textbooks, and now they're back to not having textbooks because I told them they couldn't charge for them. Well, but they're still talking about it now. So.
I do know that I've also talked to people who have come and said their children don't have textbooks, the textbooks are tattered, and there's no money, and then went out and said they wanted to surplus or excess $10 million in textbook funds because they had $10 million too much apparently. So, you know, that's why it's important to look at the budget and kind of follow along, but there's definitely plenty of textbook money. And you can tell that to whoever comes to you and says that their children don't have textbooks. So I know, I can tell you that at Walter Johnson, each child had 2 textbooks because it was just too much of a burden to have to carry home the books. So they could keep one set at home and one set at school. This was, you know, a couple of years ago, but it does vary widely apparently across the school system. So anyway, I'm going to go through chapter 1. And this is kind of pickups, so please bear with me. Chapter 1 is K through 12 instruction, and it includes, it's broken up into elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And the total amount for the budget, the total number of positions is somewhere around 11,219 positions in total for this $892,931,000. And that includes for elementary, so I'm just going to read this, so apologies. The elementary schools, they have the principals, 132 principals, 112 assistant principals, and so on for the administration. And then they break it up with preschool through grade 6, and then a number of positions for special services, including paraeducators, lunch hour aides, phys ed, art teachers, and so forth. And as I said, divided up by elementary school, so let me go through that first. Okay, the FY 2014 request for elementary schools is $420,676,174,000, an increase of $11,449,873,000 or $73 over the current FY 13 budget. So they're asking for about $11.5 million more than in the current FY 13 budget. There's
excuse me, what is their projected enrollment that they have on that?
Yes, they do. There's an increase of 1,700 elementary school students projected for FY 2014, which requires a net increase of 81.8 additional positions. And then they break them out, kindergarten and teacher positions, classroom teacher positions, art teacher, general music positions, phys ed, and lunch hour aide positions. There's also text in here regarding the new Crossway Community Montessori School, where it says there's an increase of 31 for the Crossway Community Montessori School students projected for FY 14, which requires an increase of 6.5 positions and $420,529. The increases are as follows: half position for a coordinator, 3 classroom teacher positions, 3 paraeducator, and substitutes and other program costs. And then discussions about new schools, and as Janice said, realignment. I was interested because I know times are tough and most of the other agencies have had a travel freeze for a long time, but we don't see that in MCPS. So buried here in the elementary school section is an increase of $36,666 for Montgomery County Association of Administrators and Principals employees to travel for professional development conferences as provided in the contract. So that's the increase from 13 to 14. So the total is $295,283 for elementary school for travel. And then they're restoring 5 music teacher positions. And I think everybody remembers the big uproar when they were considering deleting and getting rid of so many art and music teachers. And then in regards to the textbooks here, program efficiencies and reductions, inflation, and then negative $258,617. The amount for inflation budgeted for textbooks and instructional materials is eliminated. Efficiencies will be necessary to ensure that schools have required textbooks and materials. So that's elementary school. And then moving on to middle schools. There are 38 middle schools in the county. Okay. And again, the similar program efficiencies and reductions for textbooks, $124,127 reduced for textbooks and instructional materials to be eliminated. And here for middle schools, you see the travel, where local other travel, $151,868 for travel for middle school staff to conferences. And then for the high schools, similar for the travel, $719,186 for travel. So that it really adds up to over, I think, $1 million. You're probably from the taxpayers' league, you're better at this than me. But it really adds up in a time when the other agencies, the council, where there's a freeze on travel, they're spending quite a bit of money sending staff to conferences.
Question, when you read the earlier one, it said as per contract or something?
Yes, it did.
So what exactly does that mean? Are they contractually obligated to send
Yes.
principals? So you can trust that, basically, that's what you mean.
You can read the contract is on the MCFS website too.
Okay.
Yeah, you can cross-check that.
So if you ever see the words as per contract, you can, it is possible question.
Okay, right.
2 minutes.
Okay, and so the grand total for the high schools is $267,749,985 for FY14. That's it, yeah.
A high-level question. Of all these chapters, do I understand that K-12 instruction is most of it, that everything else is just funding for offices, or?
No.
No,
Okay.
it's kind of it's all over the place.
Okay,
I
it
mean,
is
the
okay.
way the budget always seems to be is there are terms and names for positions that cross-cut the whole budget. And it's really hard to kind of track down. We're just doing a big overview of the budget, but you have to look.
No, I understand, that's why I'm asking where to
Yeah.
look. Right.
Yeah.
So to find actual instruction spending for, say, ESL or whatever, it could be in K-12 instruction, but it also could be in office of one of these other offices hidden somewhere.
Right.
All right.
Okay. Yes,
Oh, I did an analysis of K through 12.
okay.
What would you like me to present?
Do you want to do that now? That would be great. Go ahead.
One quick question.
Uh-huh.
The maintenance of effort then on the 1,708 students would be multiplied by a factor of what the cost is per student, 14, whatever, and that is per student.
That's actually not done at that level, it's done at the total level.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm assuming
Yeah.
1,708 is the net figure. Do you have a net figure for new students coming in next year?
I don't off the top of my head.
New students next year? It's on,
Okay. Gordy Brennan from the taxpayers.
I'm an accountant, count beans for a living. Most of my friends say I'm full of beans. You'll be the judge.
Say it would become beans?
Never been beans. This section of the budget presentation is where the meat and potatoes is. And it accounts for most of the money, and it also accounts for most of the strategy that make a difference in terms kids learn. I didn't have enough probably for everybody here tonight, so if you have to share, that'd be great. The academic strategies, though, which appear in a separate document, are not linked to the budget. So we don't know if there's money to fund the strategies. And in fact, my analysis of the organization charts that Paula briefly showed you folks, these guys right here that show full-time equivalents and show what they do, could only identify 14% of the people in this budget. That's 12,111 tied to strategies. Only 14%. That means that 86% are being managed against some other set of criteria other than the strategies. Yes, ma'am?
Can you just define or give an example what you mean by academic strategy?
Yes. Focus or Title I is a euphemism for federal money and other money that is devoted expressly to bring our elementary kids up to standard. And over the last decade, we've poured billions of dollars, additional dollars, into our elementary schools to get kids off on a fast start. This ranges from traditional programs like Head Start to more innovative programs. It includes ESOL, or English for ESOL.
Speakers are second.
Thank you. Second observation, the budget for these 12,111 people, many of whom are teachers, about 8,949 as you can see, doesn't have any productivity data to support why we have as many teachers or other folks as we do. There's no benchmarking to other large school systems. For example, how many teachers does Fairfax County have to solve the same kind of academic performance problems that we have? So there's very little to analyze the base. And as an accountant, this is my most frequent observation with clients, is all the energy seems to be spent on the margin. We talk about the 200 new employees that are in the budget, but we don't talk about the other 19,800. The stated #1 goal of the Board of Education is to close the achievement gap. There is no target for closing the achievement gap. The achievement gap is measured lots of different ways. One example would be poor kids do poorly in the SAT exam compared to their wealthier peers. Okay, so what's the target for improving that, and how many additional resources do we need to get there? You won't find that in this book. Salaries are 20% higher than our friends in Howard and Fairfax County, and yet our productivity isn't as high, as measured by all the standard measures, SAT, AP, reading, math, dropout rates. Our dropout rates double Fairfax County. Now, I've heard a lot of council members say, well, that's because we're poor, we have different demographics. Well, not really. Not really. The Hispanic population in this county is 15%. In Fairfax County is 14%.
Do we have, I remember when Vance was superintendent, and I tried for years to get a per pupil expenditure. So I wanted to try to compare what they were spending at the magnet program at Blair.
That's easily obtained today through the maintenance of effort legislation.
So
it's a standard criteria for how much money.
So do we get to compare that then? Because he used to say, well, we have all this other money. I said, fine, but how much are you spending per child?
No, we're really great at spending. And they focus on that criteria specifically to justify increases in the budget as enrollment increases.
But do they have outcome?
That's the issue, isn't it? That's right. Yes, sir.
It shows here 8,949 teachers.
Yes.
Is that an authentic number? Does that mean there are 8,949 teachers in the classroom, or are there?
Yes. Now, teachers is a term of art. It's very standardized across the nation. All school systems report against this number as a standard definition. This does not include special ed teachers, because that's in a separate chapter of the budget presentation. That's why it's not magic 11,000.
So this is real people in front of the.
Real teachers, but you look at the para-ed numbers. I was surprised to see this. Increasingly, we're relying on para-ed folks who, as you might see further down, under support services, if you look at the salary and wages, their average annual salary is only $43,700 versus the average teacher wage, that's the professional number of $76,000. And we're increasingly relying on para-educators to accomplish many of our strategies. When you look at the strategies associated with the achievement gap, you'll find that many of those positions are filled by para-educators. Just quickly going over the remainder of the budget, I've talked a lot about people and salaries, and that's a big part of this number. That's almost half the budget, almost $900 million. You'll find that there is some small beer in for contracts, supplies, and other. There's some increase in these numbers, but the big number that drives the budget is personnel. 2 entities, okay. I'd like to turn to issues for a second at the bottom of this page. The red zone elementary school teachers are paid 4% less than their peers in the green zone.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
The red zone elementary school teachers are paid 4% less than the green zone school teachers.
So where did you get that number?
An analysis of data in schools at a glance, looking at all 100 and umpty-ump elementary schools.
You could almost, in the past we did it, you could almost predict where a school was by what the average teacher salary was.
Bob's correct, and I want to get into that in a second. And yet, as everybody knows, the red zone schools have lower math and reading scores.
Right.
Gordy, the
Yes.
argument though, 4% is not a lot.
It is. It's quite material to a teacher.
Well, the argument would be that the older teachers, more senior teachers.
That's why it exists, because we have more experienced teachers and we pay on a seniority basis in the green zone. But that doesn't justify it. In fact, the big question is, why can't we change how we pay teachers who take larger career risks in the red zone than the green zone? Every day that a red zone teacher comes in, they risk confronting a child who has a behavior problem or is suicidal or wants to pull a gun. And if they don't handle it exactly right, and we're all human, they get pulled up on the carpet and their career is in jeopardy. This doesn't happen in the green zone. Why aren't we compensating our teachers for the career risks they take? Why aren't we compensating them to close the achievement gap? There is no correlation between the money we pay teachers in the green zone and performance. Let me repeat that. I did a statistical analysis of reading and math scores in the green zone. There is absolutely, the numbers, the average salary school by school in the green zone, it varies, just as it does in the red zone. But there's absolutely no correlation between how much we pay teachers in the green zone and the performance of those students. In fact, the performance of the students in the green zone hasn't moved. It's up at the top. It's going to be up at the top for a long, long time, unless the world changes, because that's where the wealthier families are. The wealthier families have more stability and can afford to do everything that's required to produce an achieving child. Achievement gap update. This is coming out at the end of the month. Number one goal, number one academic performance goal in the county. It's not gonna produce the results anyone expects. What new strategies are we proposing? There are none. There are no new strategies proposed in this document, just more of the same. My question, career and technology education. This is voc ed. This is also advanced engineering classes, pre-college engineering classes. Why does most of that money go to the green zone? Why? This is a very important intervention for red zone kids. Highland Elementary School, widely published case study by Harvard. Highland Elementary was a poor red zone school half a dozen years ago. A retiring green zone principal went to Jerry Weiss, cut a deal, and said, I want to go in and turn that school around. Jerry said, knock yourself out. The guy goes in, he lays down the law. He says, we're going to be a number-driven school. You're not going to work to the clock, you're going to work to a result. If you don't like this, leave. Half of them left. They were replaced. with teachers that didn't work to the clock, set up individual instruction programs. The school turned its performance around overnight. Exactly a year ago, in Atlanta, a story broke, claiming that Highland Elementary cheated on a standardized test. Amazing. First of all, why did this story come out of Atlanta? I still don't know. Okay? But what was the reaction of the school system? Well, they were like deer in the headlights. Oh, maybe we did cheat. I don't know. We're going to study this thing. You know? Well, they studied it, and then there was no outcome. The public sensationalism disappeared, but it doesn't appear that there was cheating. Rather, interestingly, after this turnaround savior retired, he did retire, he was replaced by somebody, but he had permanently changed the culture in the school, and the numbers are still at the green zone level in reading and math. Extraordinary. Why don't we do that in every red zone school? The second page in your handout is an analysis of the case study that I produced. Key high school performance measures. The 7 keys, everybody heard of those things? I reviled them at the high school level.
Which
Say
version?
that
Which
again.
version do you
7 keys.
Any version.
Oh, okay.
I think at elementary and middle school, fine. But the 3 keys for the high schoolers, AP tests, SAT tests, and Algebra 2, they have nothing to do with poor kids. They have nothing to do with the achievement gap. They have nothing to do with the #1 priority in the school system.
But it looks good on trophies.
Eligibility for athletic participation is a wonderful universal performance measure. It covers all kids in all grades, regardless of whether they're rich or poor. You won't see that number in school and finance. You'll see it in some statistical summaries, but it's buried. And it'll tell parents everything they need to know about the quality of the school. But we're not telling parents that. We're telling them, well, look at the SAT score, which has one of the lowest participation rates among poor kids in the nation. Look at the AP scores. Again, lowest participation rate among poor kids. Algebra 2, these kids don't get Algebra 1 before they get out of 8th grade. These kids are taking double math and double English classes. Why do we have so many teachers? Well, I'll give you one answer. Every school in the Northeast Consortium, every school in the Down County Consortium is making our poor kids take double math and double English classes. That means a lot more teachers, doesn't it? Is it productive? Have we closed the achievement gap? What we have done is we've added an extra math and extra English to pass the high school proficiency exams so that more kids can graduate. You know what the dropout rate in these schools is? 10%. Kids are bored because we're teaching them the same way twice, and it isn't working the second time, and it didn't work in the first time. All right, enough of my talking here. I went well over the 8 minutes in the slide
I
conference.
would say, and when the 7 keys first came out, the HSAs were 1 keys. Passing the HSAs was a key.
Yeah.
So the keys have been changed over time.
And I might add, I mean, one of my biggest problems with double math, double English means that none of these kids can get voc ed because they have scheduling problems. They can't go halfway to Edison. And that's the one thing that would engage them
That's
and
right.
keep them in school.
Absolutely.
Are we crazy?
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute.
Something stupid.
No.
Yes, Yale.
The Taxpayers League had Nancy Laura a few weeks ago, and she says that the council really can't do anything with the overall budget of the school system.
She's right. That's
Well-
the maintenance of
Well,
effort.
here's where I'm gonna have to disagree. One thing that we can do and challenge is to change the total for the MOE. And if we can attack, and I know Bob has done this in the past, if we can challenge the number of total students in the school system, then the maintenance of effort goes down.
That's true.
Okay, so it seems to me that if we want to challenge the overall budget, because if we change one thing in the budget, they're just going to move it somewhere else.
I think you have to change the dialogue. You have to get away from this per capita
No,
concept.
no.
You have to get away from compliance. You have to get away, you have to talk strategy. You have to talk about outcomes. You have to talk about the achievement gap. You have to talk about why there's no correlation between what we pay teachers in the green zone and results.
No, that's very important, but I'm just saying that the number of students If we want to change the budget, we have to change the number of students.
Okay, we have to move on, otherwise we never get
Can
time.
we talk about
Can I ask a
maintenance
question?
property?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
all
that's
of
that
mine.
is a separate subject.
You might have to
move
do
on to,
that.
That's another night.
Sure, otherwise we'll run over. Okay, so Agnes is going to talk about chapter office, or sorry, chapter
It's two.
Okay.
Two is kind of weird because it's the
Office of
School
Professional
Support and Improvement, which is divided into the Office of Deputy Superintendent for School Support and Improvement, and then the Professional Development.
Okay.
So I was interested in the professional development portion because I had read Starr's memo at the end of December where he was requesting 1.3 million and 1.5 million to restore reductions to staff development teacher positions in middle schools. And he also asked for 1.55 million for continued professional development for teachers in elementary and secondary schools around Common Core and Curriculum 2, and $800,000 increase for professional development substitutes in secondary schools. And which I didn't know was hidden in this section until I found it while reviewing it. The $94,000 that will support the Achieving Collegiate Excellence and Success, which is the ACES program, which is the new thing they started at Montgomery College. The new best thing that, so.
Did you find anything in there that showed that we're gonna add resources to tutor kids to make them eligible for college? That's part of the program. Is it funded?
I didn't look that deeply into it. It was confusing enough reading it. So this is my first foray into actually trying to read a chapter of this budget. And it's very, and since this is a book club, I did not like this book.
Badly written.
Poorly written, I couldn't follow. It took me till today to figure out that
That's why they get what they want.
they actually divvied it up differently than how they outlined it. But anyway, so this Office of School Support and Improvement is actually divided into the Office of Deputy Superintendent for School Support and Improvement, which covers community superintendents as well as alternative schools. And then it has the Office of the Associate Superintendent for Professional Development and Support, which is further divided into 4 units, which are the Department of Instructional Leadership Support, otherwise known as DILS, the Equity Initiatives Unit, Staff Development Teacher Project Team, and the Leadership Team Development Unit. Okay, so DILS I'm going to leave to the end, even though they introduced it first, because they actually wrote a whole separate, they have their own separate budget. So they squished the other 3. The Equity Initiatives Unit is the group that runs the study circles. I don't know if you've read about them. Which has AmeriCorps members and some trained facilitators, all these contractors coming in, and the Equity Initiatives does the diversity initiatives. Then the Staff Development Teacher Project Team is school-based, and they do the training and job-embedded professional learning, and they run School Leadership Teams Institute, which is a special project with the NCEA. Don't ask me what it is, because I didn't look into it. And then the 3rd unit is the Leadership Team Development, or PCLI, which is the Professional Learning Communities Institute, which is supposed to have staff, all levels of staff from support, everybody, and then working with parents in these professional learning community things that they do. Anyway, so even though I never did find where I was going to say Starr stuck in the extra $3.8 million that he's requiring for his professional development things. I thought it was interesting, looking at the budget, I made a few copies if you just want to look at the charts. I've only got 3 copies left. All right, so the Leadership Development Unit actually has 3 people in it. Staff Development Teacher Project has 8 people, and the Equity Initiatives Unit has 10.2.
That's the guy who writes the new
We have 10.2 people. And then the DILS has 20.5 people. What was I going to say?
thing that I found most interesting about the way this is laid out, if you look at page 216, chapter 216. If you look at, I thought last year or this year was supposed to be, you're under restrictions, okay? So I'm not quite understanding why fiscal 2012, the actual expenditures were $2.3 million. Yet, if you look at the approved version of fiscal 2013 budget, it was up to $3.154 million, which is an increase of $827,000. And then if you look at the current 2013 budget, which is actually, during the year, they keep adding money, which isn't nobody pays attention to, but that actually increased by $115,000. So the actual budget that they have is actually, what he's asking for in 2014 is actually $97,000 above what was approved in 2013. Yet if you notice in the column where it says change, it's actually a negative. It looks like they're reducing it by $18,000. In reality, it's actually still an increase in 2013. So trying to figure out these positions, just little things I thought were interesting. The travel budget, how it was non-existent in 2012, there's $42,000 in it now. And then, what else? Total contractual services increased from 2012, 9,215 to 129,000, and that's in contracts. So outside contractors coming in. So going back to the 2012 to 2013, when they increased the approved budget by $827,000, that 6 positions were added, equivalent to $753,669. That averages out to $125,611 salary per person. They increased other salaries by $23,000. They increased other contractual by $13,000. They increased supplies and materials by about $10,000, which is double the budget for that. And then they increased the travel again. Somebody else pointed out that, we're supposed to be on an austerity budget here, and then they increased it $27,000, which is double from what it was in 2012. Oh, 1 minute left. Okay, and so, I think I mentioned that, so within the year, fiscal 13 this year, they went from the approved budget to what they're actually giving this group is, they increased it by $115,000. So, so this is just for the Office of Professional Development. So the increase through the Office of Professional Development total from 2012 to 2013, because you're considering what the current is, what they're actually giving them, was really $942,000, almost $1 million. Just,
Wow.
And no children will be harmed. They won't have any.
yeah, we're just controlling it. So I really don't see where the reductions occurred. And for realignments, I mean, I see where they did some realignment inside, so that they took, they realigned $10,820 for professional substitutes, and they gave $10,000 for professional part-time salaries, and $820 towards mileage reimbursement for local travel. Then they realigned $5,000 from the equity unit, again for travel for professional development for DILs and directors. And then they realigned $17,000 from equity to program supplies. So it's just, there's just too much to to really go over in 8 minutes. But I was just astounded by the amount that the budget for this group jumped from 2012 to 2013.
But we can't do
Yet
anything about it.
Yeah, I know, but they make it seem, if you read the request for 2014, that it looks like all these reductions, but they're not really reductions, because they're reductions because of what they increased during the year above the approved budget. So,
My question is the line item called professional substitutes here. Do you know what that means in the context of this administrative office?
not really. The only thing I can think of is if they have to attend staff development during in school time, they need substitutes. So I'm thinking professional substitutes are for the higher level.
But these positions, are these people in the schools, these 24 people? Okay, so we're not sure what they're doing.
That's why we don't like them.
We don't like the characters.
They're FTEs.
We don't like the characters. Okay, so,
They're real people.
This is, I'll do chapter 3, which is the Office of the Deputy Superintendent for Teaching, Learning, and Programs. This is a very small chapter, and in this department, the Deputy Superintendent, there are 6 positions. And the total salary that they're requesting, grand total, is $707,308. For these 6 people, their total salary request is $684,226. Of the 6 people, 1 is the deputy superintendent, 1 is an executive assistant, 1 is a supervisor, 1 is an administrative services manager level 3, 1 is a copy editor / admin secretary, and the other is an admin services manager, class 1, or level 1. So for 6 positions, they're requesting over $100,000 per position. And yet, 3 of these positions really do seem to be kind of, secretarial, copy editor, but sort of that office management type position. And again, these are not people that are going to be in the schools or the classrooms.
Never see a job.
Right, so they manage, and there's an org chart here. So the deputy superintendent, along with their 5 employees, manage the Office of Community Engagement and Partnerships, the Office of Special Education and Student Services, the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Programs. And don't forget, each one of these offices also separately does have a full administrative staff, and the Office of Shared Accountability. And so their mission is to lead systemic school reform. And then they supervise all these different offices with these 6 staff members. So again, here's a situation where you have 6 people working in an office as managers, requesting over a total of $700,000. Even, which to me just seems to be like they're duplicating the effort. This is a whole office.
I agree,
And,
it's 100% duplication.
yeah, it
You give
is.
your managers, we call them principals, performance targets, and you hold them accountable to them. You don't need this.
Right, exactly. So this is just another example. As you go through the budget, you see this real duplication and replication of incredible amount of money spent on management. It's called bloat. Okay. Bloat. Okay. So anyway, this is just a really brief chapter, and just to go through it. So chapter 4, Roseanne.
Okay, if everybody's eyes aren't totally blurred over, I come to the talk about curriculum and instructional programs. And the big takeaway of curriculum and instructional programs is that you call it something else. So people are totally confused, you don't know what they're talking about, and you use a lot of buzzwords so people think that you know what they're talking about. So let me read to you the mission. The mission of the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Programs is to support school system priorities that focus on the instructional core by leading the development and implementation of well-designed, differentiated curriculum and instructional programs that build 21st century skills, foster social emotional learning, and prepare students for college and careers. Well, this is a big chapter. This chapter is actually 60 pages, but it's organized by people. So you have
a copy editor to fix that.
right. So you have the Eric Lang section, and then you have the Marty Creel section, and you have the Betsy Brown section. Except that these things are not really Betsy Brown, Marty Creel, and whoever else, the 4 people.
They are.
Right. So, and what's the difference between accelerated and innovation? There's a separate department of accelerated and innovative education and a department of enriched and innovative education. And what's the difference between being accelerated and being enriched? The key here, and what most parents want to know, is what's available to my kid, and is my kid getting what everybody else can get? And the answer is no. You can each get something different, but you don't know what it is until you show up at the school. So, aside from the fact that there's a lot of jargon, that people who are supposed to be teaching us how to have basic skills in a county that's no longer, with a large number of new immigrants, people who don't speak English, they're the kings and queens of jargon. So what you do need to do, and this is where I send people, is there's another document. Budgets are supposed to be on their face. You're supposed to have everything in your budget say, this is what we're going to do, this is the money we need, and this is how we're going to spend it. Not here at all. What this document shows us is this is what Eric Lang's going to play with, this is what Marty Creel's going to play with, this is what Betsy Brown's going to play with, and this is what the other two people are going to play with. They can't even tell you, they can't even add correctly. For example, they talk about OCIP is composed of 3 departments. The DCI, the DIP, and the DEIP. In addition, the Division of Title I Programs, DTP, reports to the Associate Superintendent of OCIP. That's 4, not 3. Anyway. But what you need to look at is something called the program budget, which is a whole different document that's there, but people don't really come and look at the program budget because they think what we're supposed to look at is the operating budget that Josh and Jerry before him and Vance all sent you to. There are a couple of other documents that actually have more information. The program budget was not something I had seen before. We had seen a couple of years ago, we learned to look at the personnel complement, which actually showed you how many students, how many teachers were in your kid's school. And I found that was very useful because the number would be that each kid in middle school math, the average middle school math class size was supposed to be 16 students for 1 teacher. And I had 2 kids in middle school one year, and one had a class of 32, one had a class of 33, and I said, does that mean on the law of averages that there are 2 other classes with 8? And they said, no. I said, you mean there's 1 class with 1 kid in it? And they said no. And I said, so how do you get to this average class size of 16 if my kids are in classes of 33 and 34, and they're in 2 different schools? Well, Mrs. Horowitz, you just wound up at the wrong end of the string. I said, anyway, so a lot of this is pie in the sky, but what you look at is one of these other documents called the program budget, which goes along with the operating budget. And the program budget actually tells you what you're supposed to know. Let me read this to you. The program budget is published twice annually. In January, following publication of this, the superintendent's recommended operating budget and personnel complement, and in July, following publication of the real operating budget summary and personnel complement. The one that's
Twice a year?
This one's twice a year.
Yeah.
While those publications display the budget by organizational unit, as in the Eric Lang, Marty Creel, and Betsy Brown budget, the program budget includes an inventory of programs that in total match the total operating budget. So it goes on to say each program summary includes a description of the program and budget changes. I looked at one chapter and I didn't see any budget changes. Only changes that result from significant changes in the program are discussed. So I went and I looked at it. There are page references that allow the reader to crosswalk to related information in the recommended and summary operating budget documents. And finally, for each program, there's a chart that provides expenditure data. This is the one you're supposed to look at. Because if you pull out a chapter, and I just pulled out the Enriched and Innovative Programs, this will describe to you what this program really is. The budget includes programs, functions, and activities. Activities, that's what I want to know about. In the Department of Enriched and Innovative Programs, the Division of Accelerated and Enriched Instruction, the Division of Consortia Choice and Application Programs, and the elementary, middle, and high school budgets. So this actually tells you what all these things mean. It tells you what they mean by the Gifted and Talented Magnet Program. It tells you what they mean by a middle school magnet consortium.
Time.
Oh,
No, 1 minute.
As I said, I just picked this as an example. And it also gives you a list of everything that's in every school. So what you will find is that if you want, your school will have something, but it's not necessarily what's in the next school, but it's something to show that everybody here gets an equitable shot at the budget, or an equitable shot at having something special in their school, whether or not they actually access it. It's all in your school, and it's up to your kids to figure out what it's called and to ask for the right thing. So, my takeaway line is be sure you know what things are called, because if you ask them about something, they will tell you it doesn't exist unless you ask for it by the exact right name.
Where do you, where do we find the program budget?
The program budget is on the webpage.
It is right there with the operating budget, but I've never seen two. I'm looking back at FY12, there's still only one listed, so I don't know where the second one would be. No, I know.
The way they number these things,
Yeah.
the way they number these things, they must, this one cites that elementary schools is at pages 1-3, middle schools are pages 1-11, high schools are pages 1-19, and division accelerated and enriched instruction is 4-22. So they must not change these things from one iteration to the next, if you can go between the same pages each time. So there's always something that pays to look at when they don't point you in that right direction.
Now, Bob Monsheimer is going to do chapter 5, Office of Special Education and Student Services.
All right, good day, everybody. I gave you a 2-page, it's kind of a highlight. This is a huge budget with 4,000 teachers, paraeducators, and administrators. You know, you're talking about a budget of $317 million this year, and it's an increase of $9 million, but the increase is almost meaningless because it primarily is just the step increases that you're seeing. There's a little bit for additional staff, but the reality of it is it's a huge department. 10% of the students of the school system are covered by there. A little over 10%, I think, now have the 2 qualifications to qualify under there. And we did notice in this year that there'll be 91 positions added to MCPS, you know, some of which were restorations. If you go back down lower, there was in the medical area, they restored cuts they did in 2012 for the paraeducators to go to home visits. But one of the areas that what I was a little disturbed when we heard this more and more is this travel budget that seems to have been dramatically increased across the school system's budgets. This one was a $170K increase, 25% over this year. It's a pretty dramatic increase in a year that you shouldn't have it. The other thing that always disturbs me is when you have a huge miscellaneous expense budget, and they have $38 million in here as miscellaneous expense. I find that
38 million?
38 million. When you're talking about just about $1 in $8 is miscellaneous, that's a significant number.
And there's no analysis
I
of
think
it?
the increase in the travel has to do with the shifting of PEP classes from preschool classroom-based to itinerant PEP services.
Well, there's some of that, but I mean, there's no explanation from them why it's increased, just as it increases.
Yeah.
So that one had me a little bit, only because if you just tell me you're increasing it without a legitimate reasoning. That's that. Now, one thing that a lot of people follow is the outside legal. They are reducing it by $100,000 this year, but to offset that, they brought in an attorney, a paralegal, and a secretary. So the reality, it's going to cost the taxpayers probably $200,000 more than what they would have gotten.
To reduce it by 100,000.
Yes.
That takes care of Brickyard.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, so just leave.
in medical assistants, they had 9 new paraeducators. That's a restoration of cuts previously. But one of the things that everybody should understand is the reason that and page 528 is a percentage is being shifted to what they call back into the general classroom. And every year it's been going up. And this year it's going to be 77. They're budgeting another 5% of the students with special needs should be going into general education classes, which means more paraeducators across the board. Plus, it's very hard to audit what's being done at the school level. It's one of the biggest problems that we've never been able to solve, is where are these teachers and what's really going on. I did show some enrollment changes that they showed, and some of the ratios are incredible. I mean, it's like 1 to 3 and 1 to 4. The preschool, which is we're talking about, I actually called up, and it's supposed to be going into 6 more schools, from 24 to 30. 105 new students, with interesting, they say 17 staff one place and 29 in another. So I'm assuming 29 is what they're adding. And literally they have two different areas, and that's why it's very difficult in this budget because the details don't flow. It's been an overall MCPS problem anyway. If you've ever tried to tie detail back to totals, almost never happens. Not till the next budget after the count, when they finally reconcile. One of the things that I'm always protected, because my son's in the bridge, is they showed a projection of 30 less students next year. It's not a big program, but 30 less students in bridge, which would be a significant drop in bridge since it's gone up every year for the last 8 years. So,
Where do they think they're gonna go?
well, we know where they're going to go, because your number went from 72.5 to 77.5. So they're going to move those 30 students supposedly into general education with paraeducators. And these are, so that just shows you the choices are getting less and less for, if you're not in general education, this budget is not, it gives you indicators that once you're outside, once you're into the K through 12 curriculum, there is less choices every year, especially when we know that this was the final year of the secondary learning centers, and they saved $424,000 by closing those for this year, but it's been a lot bigger numbers in the past.
Were there ever any outcome data for them?
They've never published any outcome data.
Do they have it?
Do they have it? They probably know it, but there's been nothing published to show that that was effective. Again, the reason being is their whole concept is what they call the least restrictive environment. So they're moving as many people under any circumstances into the general education curriculum, because there's a trend that they want to obtain.
What's the cost for a special ed child, student in Montgomery?
It's usually roughly about double. If you took the numbers when we've done in the past, it's when you could find the real numbers, it's generally running about 60 to 100% over what a child in general education is.
30,000 roughly.
No, I mean, it's probably in the 26 to 28,000 range. Because you got to remember there are some students that in the private placements that can be well over 100,000. So, it all depends on the services they need. There aren't that many in that very expensive category anymore.
But the kids that are in non-public schools are funded by a funding formula.
Yeah,
So MCPS only pays a portion.
right.
But my understanding is that the part that the state pays, like MCPS pays, say, I don't know, $50,000 tuition, and then the state reimburses according to the funding formula. But that money doesn't go back into special ed.
No, it goes in the general
It
fund.
goes back into the general fund.
Correct.
Aren't there federal funds too? I thought there were.
Not to go to private placements.
No, there's very little. Most of the federal funding we get isn't really, we don't get that much.
No.
Yeah,
For
really.
special ed? I always thought.
No, we don't get that much. So, but the whole focus that we all have to understand is everything that is being done is mostly moved to this least restrictive environment, which is why we've closed the secondary learning centers, but the problem is when the definition of LRE, least restrictive environment, is an interesting one. The school systems interpret it to be in general education. That is not what it's represented to be. It's actually supposed to be what's best for that student to perform. In some cases, it could be something like a bridge. In fact, they're going to have to do something like an elementary education bridge because next year, what we found out, I think that's part of the 105, that they've had so much behavioral issues in elementary education. We're not talking about like kids that act out like autism, they're talking about violence to the point where they can't be kept in a school. That over the last 5 years, they're now talking about it significant enough to do it. The only other thing that you must watch out for special education is the transportation costs that are in there really aren't true, never have been. If a special education child rides a bus in general education, transportation will be assessed with special education.
Really?
I found that one out by talking to the transportation
Todd
department.
Wilkins?
No.
Somebody else?
Yeah, one of the supervisors. So that's what, I could go into lots of different things on here, but basically it's, if you were going to describe it, it's we're moving more students into general education.
When Bob was the trend up, going up,
For
for special ed budget, or?
the budget didn't really go up significantly. If you looked at the $9 million, it really didn't go up significantly for anything other than step increases and a few, and the 90 positions you could, those are literally, you could take about 95% of the increase went right there. So it wasn't real hard to calculate.
The cost per student,
Not much.
if it's less.
Well, they added
students.
more students overall, but they're just moving them more toward general education. It's just harder to find them at that point.
But isn't the maintenance and effort an increase every year automatically, and doesn't that translate then into higher cost per student?
No.
That was my understanding
No,
of how
that
it is.
MOE is the overall. It doesn't, they can cast it whatever categories they want.
But they have to do it.
Well, that's the overall budget, not the individual categories. I wish it was the overall.
I'm gonna run through chapters 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Chapter 6, again, is the Office of Shared Accountability that does reporting and
Yeah.
analysis. And so again, this is an administrative office at Carver that really has nothing to do with teaching teachers. They just collect data and create reports.
Not. Or,
Okay, so here their entire budget is $4,248,154. That's $4,000,025 for an office composed of 41 people that collect data and write reports. And here they also have a travel budget of $6,944. And it's composed of the associate superintendent, assistant to the associate superintendent, administrative services manager, and again, a copy editor / administrative secretary. And then a number of other staff members that write the report. And I'll read the mission here, which is, the mission of the Office of Shared Accountability is to provide timely, responsive, and useful information that supports high expectations, equitable practices, and continuous improvement efforts throughout Montgomery County Public Schools. And one of their major functions is to conduct research to understand factors that influence student outcomes and perceptions of school quality. So that's an odd word to use, perceptions. But that's what, and then there's a discussion of their trends and accomplishments, most of what it is, which is, research and reports. Provide ongoing technical support and data analysis to MSTAT, which many of you know in the county. Developed instruments and administered surveys addressing programs or initiatives, including 4,493 student, 1,020 staff, and 1,724 parent surveys related to program evaluation. Completed 21 research or outcome evaluations in the form of reports, briefs, or data summary memos on impacts of MCPS programs and so forth. So that they're generating reports and data all the time. They actually have performance measures in their section. So one of their performance measures was OSA will frequently update the middle school and college readiness monitoring tools to provide school staff with actionable data. And the actual in 2012 was 11, and they're estimating for this year, 2013, 11, and they're recommending 11 for the coming fiscal year as well. Similarly, performance measure, OSA will review and respond to ad hoc data analysis requests. And in 2012, the actual was 62 responses. They're estimating for FY13, 65, and they're recommending for FY14, 67 responses that they would have to, or for requests. And I don't know if anyone has ever seen all these reports or ever tried to get them from MCPS, but they're churning out a lot of data. Yeah, so.
The U.S. Department of Education has a What Works clearinghouse, which has, and you have to have sort of minimum criteria of a decent enough study to go into the What Works inventory. How many studies have Montgomery County Public Schools contributed to that?
That,
not covered by the budget.
I don't know if it, and I don't know if it's called, what I'm reading is it's not called out here as something that's a federal, you're saying it's a federal mandate?
No, what I'm saying is I don't think any of their studies are worth anything.
Okay.
So you don't like the book. You really mean.
Do they post,
What are
they
you trying
don't,
to
do
say?
they post them? Or do they have a website where they post anything from that office?
Some.
yes.
I mean, according to this, there are a lot of reports that they're providing internally. And if they're all up there, I don't know if they are or not, but they should be available. I've certainly never tried to, specifically ask based on their performance measures. I can tell you that many times I have asked for information and it is not forthcoming. So,
From that particular office?
Pardon?
From that particular office?
No, just from MCPS. So again, this is an office within MCPS with a total budget of over $4 million. And it really doesn't have much to do with your children in the school. And there may be federal mandated reporting requirements that it's responding to, but there's really nothing in here, that says the federal government requires these. Bob?
So, the essence really is whether the reports are any good, because if they are good, then this is exactly what they ought to be doing.
Right.
So, since I don't think we've got the actual information about whether they're good or not, then I don't know we can say that it's wasted money or not.
We don't see a lot of improvement.
Well, that's a different question. The question is, are they doing a good job of evaluating programs? But this is the place where they would evaluate programs,
That's right.
and they ought to be doing that.
That's right.
And they should be, it seems like they would be better known though, wouldn't they be?
You'd
among the bigger
think
people
so,
that
yeah,
we have
but
here.
maybe as you say, they treat them as internal documents. I don't know.
Yes, yeah.
That would be a pity.
That's not totally true. There are quite a few reports they have there. I have no way of commenting whether they're the right reports or enough of them, or would you expect more or better out of the number of people? I have no idea. But you can find things like across schools, how are people doing on various things,
there you go.
participation rates and various
Yeah.
things. And so they're doing that. But I guess the point is, they're doing more internally that I guess we don't know anything about, right? Maybe.
Well, and the point is, as a taxpayer, is this what you want to spend $4 million on? I mean,
If it's good, yes.
Yes.
Well, you see.
I guess out of, yeah.
Meanwhile, they've
Yeah.
never
Paul,
gotten rid of a program.
politically, when we start challenging if they can do it better,
Mhm.
Montgomery County makes Maryland the #1 state in the United States for education. Otherwise, we would be 26th. Isn't
What-
that right?
What about Howard County?
Huh?
What about Howard County?
Well, because we have so many students, we make it #1, okay? So when we start challenging this, they're just gonna come back and say, well, we're #1 in the country, I guess we could do it a little bit better.
According to what measure are we #1 in?
Education.
Education.
The
Oh, you
Booster
mean
Club,
where
the
Jerry Reese is
MCPS.
on the board? Oh.
No, but even before he was on the board, they were #1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally have always wondered when I've heard these news reports about this #1, because it seems as if there's a very small percentage getting an outstanding education. There are an awful lot that are sliding through the cracks. But I just want to comment on one thing I witnessed. through a friend of mine who only wanted $16,000 reimbursement for a doctor and a psychiatrist that had helped her child reach 4 grade levels in 6 months after 5 years of deterioration in every program they put her child in the system. And what I personally witnessed was they must have spent $500,000 with this crew attorney who mopped the floor with the teacher and the psychiatrist. And they had that room packed with people who hadn't seen this child in 1 or 2 years, offering the mother, you can go into this program, but we're not paying you for anything else. And they were absolutely resistant to any changes based upon what had helped this child versus what had failed. Nothing was going to change.
Right.
And that's an awful lot of wasted time. And wasted lives.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
not interested in replicating this and seeing whether other kids would benefit.
Right.
It was simply right. It was really sickening.
Yeah, I've been reading some of the emails on.
And the ombudsman, that could be abolished and that money could be put in the classroom.
It has been abolished.
Has it been abolished? He was
Well,
useless.
he has several, he wears several hats. I don't think he gets more than one salary.
One thing that
Well,
was suggested a while back is for the Office of Shared Accountability to report directly to the Board of Education instead of the superintendent, in the hopes that they would feel more free to really let it all hang out in their reports instead of only, you know, tailoring their report to what the superintendent wants to see.
Sure, I have, and that's partly an answer to your question. I have seen, I know there was, I don't know if she still works there, but I've seen some reports by Claire Von Secker, and they weren't really that great. This was a couple years ago, but I have to admit, I haven't looked at any reports from
I mean, the word is right now that STAR is not using this office, that the people there are bored and they're out looking for other jobs. So,
Well, that would be nice if we didn't have to pay them.
We'll just put some.
So I will run also through Chapter 7, which is the Office of Community Engagement and Partnerships. And this office has a staff of 20.5 FTEs, and their total budget is $1,758,849, with the travel included in that, travel of $14,690. And here, this is a group that apparently does go out and sets up meetings with schools and communities and groups in the school. And their mission is to become the primary catalyst in MCPS's effort to engage the communities of the children and families we serve to empower the core functions of their education. And they are responsible to develop and coordinate system-wide parent and community outreach to support student learning to improve student achievement. And from reading this, it sounds like they go out and they meet with the parents and they try to support local parent groups. So as their trends and accomplishments, they work with the Parent Academy. They set up 101 free Parent Academy workshops during 2011-2012. They had 6 workshops of the MCPS Parent Advisory Council. They helped with EdLine. They strengthened and enhanced volunteer programs by providing training to volunteer coordinators. So they do, while not working in the classroom, it sounds like they do work with the parents to try to strengthen parent involvement.
What is the name of that again, please?
This is the Office of Community Engagement and Partnerships, and Timothy B. Warner is the Chief Engagement and Partnership Officer.
And they do the back to school fair too.
They do that, oh, and that has become bigger and bigger each year, actually.
Is there any breakdown between the red zone and, as to where they go?
No, that's interesting. It doesn't,
I
I
would
mean,
hope
I
they
can,
go to the red zone more than.
I would assume they, well,
It's hard to assume anymore.
Sometimes they have tables
well,
in
there's
the
also a
mall
lot in
and
the
stuff like
green
that.
zone of parents who don't speak English.
yeah, they do talk about telephone access in English and Spanish, staff responded to more than 1,400 questions and requests for support posted on the Ask MCPS email Dropbox in 2011/2012. So it sounds like they really tried to go into the communities, yeah.
How much help were they in setting up this meeting, and where are they tonight?
We did not, no, actually, I don't know, I did.
Busy, Sheldon, they're very busy.
I did, just to let everybody know, I did send out emails to the board a few times, inviting them as well as to ICLEG and to the county council. And I heard right away from Leggett's office that he could not attend, and I did get some emails from council members who couldn't attend, but I never heard a word from the board.
But these are, I'm sorry, these are taxpayers' dollars paying for people to do parent outreach, and here we are looking at the budget, and did they help you prepare this meeting? And are they getting any parent input based on how frustrating everybody is?
No, no.
Sounds like no.
Nobody from, the emails I sent went to the Board of Education, and apparently, possibly nobody from the board forwarded the email to this organization.
It seems as though the budget officers in the various places do know that we're having this meeting, because they was responding particularly fast today, and
Yes.
actually mentioned that they knew that this meeting was going on.
Because I was getting fast responses today for the first, and getting stuff for the first time I had it put out 2 weeks ago, and all of a sudden, boom.
Really? That's interesting. Okay. So this chapter also does include
Yeah,
performance measures. So number of partnerships with community organizations recommended for FY14 is 250. Performance measure average yearly number of calls handled by Ask MCPS call center, recommending 13,000. So, which is, not every chapter had these performance measures. Number of parents participating in the Parent Academy, 2,800 they're recommending. The actual in FY12 was 2,050. So they're really expecting quite a big jump. And then parents participating in workshops conducted in response to requests from schools and parent and community organizations. So that answers your question that I did not realize that we could have requested them to help us. But they were, in FY12, the actual were over 12,000, and now they're recommending 13,000. So, I guess that is a good resource.
It is. It sounds like it's something that we could support.
Okay, all right, and so that's chapter 7, and chapter 8 is
Gordon.
Gordon.
On the third page of what I handed out at the beginning is the summary of the Chief Operating Officer's budget.
It's big.
And this is where the mother lode of overhead lives.
Yeah.
Now, that's not necessarily bad, particularly if you like food, because this is where food services.
Yeah.
If you like to get to school by a bus, this is where transportation lives.
Except
If
for
you want the
special
air
ed.
conditioner to work, this
Except for
is
special ed. Special ed transportations,
Separate.
buses are separate.
I understand. But except as they come into the general population, except
No.
we do the numbers.
No,
Okay, well,
got it.
I'll go with you. This is where plant building operations lives, the electric building is paid. And this is also where the bean counters live, my favorite people.
Hey, watch it.
There's $800 million in this budget. So that overwhelms all the other overhead we've talked about. Now, this is a little bit confusing because they plugged $500 million into this budget to find a single consolidated home for benefits, for employee benefits within the school system.
Table 823.
There it is. So if you back that out, it's not quite as big. But nonetheless, this is where 4,360 employees, about a fifth of the labor force, work. None of it relates to academic strategies. It's all overhead. Some of it's direct overhead because some of these people are actually in the school building, right? Like the school plant operations people.
Yeah.
And the food workers. They're not included in this. That's off budget. I'm glad you brought that up. Nurses are actually paid through the Department of Public Health. And the school system gets a free ride on that. You'll find that the principals kind of ignore them because they're not in their budget. And the nurses kind of ignore the principals because they don't report to them. And so there's no correlation between the health of the student population and the principal's payment.
Yeah.
So that's in the county budget.
That's in the county, but as is
And there's a lot of
the-
other services.
The officers that are, that are in the school building for security, that's in the police budget. Glad you mentioned that. As with the other budget, there's no productivity or comparative benchmark data to justify these costs. Although it looked like a pretty lean bean counting operation. They don't have a lot of accounts payable clerks or accounts receivable clerks. A lot of that's been automated. They have a brand new fancy accounting system, which originally created a lot of headaches, I understand, but it's cooking now and Oracle is rich. World-class organizations have overhead rates of 20%. Well, we got 20% in that first budget I talked about. The K through 12 budget, between the administrators in a school, the guidance counselors, the media, dudes and dudettes. I've never seen one of those things busy. God bless them. But they're carrying out the caveman here. That's 20% right there. So we don't need Carver. We don't need any of this stuff if we're world class. But we're not world class. In fact, our overhead as a system as a whole is over 50% of our budget. That's money that could be going into the classroom to teach our kids. Fringe benefits are consolidated, I mentioned that. The budget itself, there's about $200 million for salaries and wages. That's going to go up a little bit for a step increase. Of course, they all got it in the last budget, right? So everybody got a pay raise, so no surprise there.
Two
pay raises.
Yeah, so we're good for a decade now?
No, they're actually in negotiations right now.
There's
That's
one more.
what's not in the budget
Yeah.
was stated that was an estimated budget because they don't have that, the unions have not.
Well, I can tell you the administrators ought to be happy because their average
Yeah.
wage is $258,000. $258,930. There's only 4 of them. You can see that.
Is that just salary or salary?
Salary.
And benefits?
Support services, which is a euphemism for all the food service workers, for all transportation workers, school plan operation, maintenance, they average only $43,000 a year, which is actually lower, that's skewed down by the bus drivers. There's 1,000 bus drivers, and they don't make nothing.
They also get
So
paid.
beware of averages in MCPS, whether it's average SAT scores or average salaries.
Yes.
You'll notice that within transportation, the numbers are pretty low. Foodies don't get paid much. But the numbers grow as you look at school plan operations. And when you look at maintenance, they're the best compensated people. And I bring this up because the rest of the money is pretty immaterial again, as it usually is. Labor is where our costs are. You have to ask yourself, how do these costs compare to other school systems? How does this compare to our friends in Fairfax County? Do they have the same number of mechanics per bus as we do? Or do they coordinate with their county and use the same mechanics for the vehicle motor pool that the county has for buses? Ike Leggett has actually asked the new superintendent a year ago if he'd like to engage in shared services. Mechanics was one example. Bean counting is another fine example. Everything here, except for the 4 policymakers, the 4 administrators, is something that could be a shared service. Well, it was summarily rejected, and he was told a year ago that this was a bare bones budget. How do MCPS benefit costs, that's this 500 million plus, compare to benefits for other county employees? And Bob's the specialist on this. Yes, ma'am. 2 minutes. But this is a big dispute, and it's not just the parents that are asking this question, the unions are asking this question, because we have rival unions battling over parity on benefits.
$35 to $40 million
Yeah.
compared.
And Bob, this doesn't include health benefits, does it?
The health benefits are in the budget,
Yeah, but
in that
This
section.
is retirement money, this is. I couldn't tell, honestly. I can't even analyze that
Yeah,
big
it's
chunk of money.
In the health benefits, they did in this budget, because I finally went through, and they did increase the copays for the first time in 4 years,
To $10.
Okay,
from $5 to
so it's
$10.
still a pretty good deal.
Correct.
Yeah.
Most private employers are now 25.
All right.
Gordy, Board of Education budget, is that in there?
No,
Huh?
no, that's a separate section.
Separate section?
Yeah.
But,
Coming.
and the
Third
big
issue.
increase, of course, is the state, the big
Yes.
increase on yours was the state pension shift.
Right.
Yeah.
Third issue I have, in 2009, the state did an audit of MCPS. And they questioned high facility and transportation costs. That was the state. And the response and recommendation for remediating this issue was a bunch of stuff, well, we'll look at it, et cetera. I see no evidence in this budget that they've done anything. Headcounts have held steady. This is a jobs program. And I don't say that recklessly, because in this county in particular, we have a lot of jobs programs, whether it's how we distribute alcohol and retail it. Yes, yes,
I
ma'am.
was just wondering, is that audit available?
Yes, it's public information. Go to the state website, state audit website, January 2009.
Thank you.
When we do for another one?
Yeah,
Well, they moved it, it was gonna be, what, I forget how many years, and they changed it like every six.
I have to say.
Every what?
Six.
I think
6
there's
years?
an analyst second.
It's a process, and it's a process audit, it's not a real audit,
Yeah.
it's a process audit.
Right, it's a process audit, but they hit some substance. We have high transportation costs. We have very high facility costs. We got more schools. We got almost double the schools that Fairfax County has. But they got more students. Go figure. Last point. So this jobs program. Have we ever done an analysis of how we could share services with the county, back office, bus mechanics, or even outsource some of this work?
Information technology?
Yeah.
Food service, bus operators, plant operation, maintenance. What would be the impact on productivity? What would be the impact on cost? I'm saying that we only need 4 people to run the show.
Thanks. Okay, Louis? Louis Willen, who's
Yeah, I
going to
actually
do
called
Chapter 9, Office of the Chief Technology Officer.
Find out what the copays were.
Hello. Okay.
Thank you.
Just to hit on a few high points, of course.
Yes, go ahead.
One of these markers, okay. In the, I believe there's there.
We have the highest in the state.
I like to look at things on a per student basis. So, I like to look at things on a per student basis. And the Office of the Chief Technology Officer total budget is, it's basically $26 million. It doesn't change much. It's about the same in fiscal year 2013, 2014. Okay, on a per student basis, though, that comes to about $180 per student. Per student, all right. So how much of that, for those of you who grab copies of this, no cheating, okay, right now. How much of that do you think it goes toward equipment, like hardware and software per student? How much, there's $180 per student per year. How much of it do you think goes toward?
$10.
You're
A little low.
You're cheating. Okay, somebody else. Anybody else?
Half?
You're off by 100%. Okay.
I knew it was between 30.
$5 per student. Okay.
Wow.
That's all we spend. Okay, so $175
Is overhead?
is all these other things. Salaries basically. Salaries. Salaries. Okay. So I'm thinking, why does it cost $175, that leaves, $175 of what we'll call it overhead, all right, or administrative cost, to run $5 worth of computers. Right? I think that's high. All right, now, let me just say, I'm speaking for myself right now, but professionally I work for IBM. I've been there 23 years, and I've worked for a couple other companies in my life. But again, I want to note again, I'm just speaking for myself, not for my company. But in my experience, that's like really high. I think we have a little bit of a jobs program here too in this department.
Can that be done by the county?
Could it be done by the county? Well,
Doesn't even need to be, it could be done privately.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, but I think we got a lot of people running these compute, a lot of overhead, it's computing costs.
I'm curious if that could be explained by not buying new equipment, like IBM to keep up with the best equipment, I would think.
Well, by not buying new equipment, maybe if that could be part of it. Maybe too much is being spent maintaining, sticking with older things, okay, older technologies. I don't know, okay. There's not enough information here to really say that definitively.
There's no maintenance budget, so to speak.
Well, there's is there a maintenance budget?
Not in, this is the operating budget, not in here, it would be in capital, right?
Yeah.
No, maintenance is not.
No, maintenance of the computers.
Repairs would be.
The computer refreshment would be in the capital.
What they call equipment here, which is, as far as I can tell, if I'm reading this right, that's all the hardware and software that they're buying in that year.
No, it wouldn't be software, would it?
Well, I don't see anywhere else here.
Yeah, but I think that some of that's in CapEx budget, so
Is it? Okay.
there is some CapEx budget. But $180 a student is still, even if you assume $5 software versus the hard climate, you're still talking $175 per student, and that's extraordinarily high
For maintaining.
for maintaining the network. And
Well, I think that's extraordinary low to be spending.
yeah, well, I'm just saying, and the 175 is extraordinarily high, and they have not yet started going to cloud or anything else. I only know that because I know who's trying to sell them that.
So MCPS sells some of its software and so forth to other school districts. They've got an office, let me see, what's it called? Entrepreneurial Activities Fund in the previous chapter. Do you know what revenue they get from that?
The revenue that we get from that, we
know what they spend. It's $2 million.
Some of that revenue, it seems to be hidden. I don't know. Janice, can you?
I couldn't find the revenue anywhere.
Now, that's exactly, for example, I can give you an easy example of a place they get revenue, cell towers.
Yep.
They're getting money from cell towers. You can't find in the budget how much they're getting anywhere.
At
But
one
that's in
point-
there somewhere,
At
how
one
much.
point, that was at the school level. That's why.
No, some of the money is, it's
But I'm
split up.
saying, but, I mean, a lot
It's, some of the money goes to
Yeah.
school, some to the cluster, some to the real estate office.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is there's no line item in there that says revenue from cell towers.
and how do you allocate, and how it's
And there
allocated.
should be a new one that'll say revenue from Pearson curriculum.
Yes.
There should be revenue from wireless generation. We know some of the places where they think they're making money. When we've investigated, we found they didn't make any money.
Yeah.
That's the question.
They weren't even.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact,
So,
we have done Maryland Public Information Act requests to get some of the contracts for some of these supposedly income-producing activities. They have redacted entire pages. Right? One of the big ones was what's that company?
wireless, was wireless generation?
Yeah, wireless generation. After it took us a while, but they finally gave us the wireless generation agreement. It's a company that produces these like that. Well, there was this proprietary handheld device. Now it's something that's not quite so proprietary, but they have proprietary software. But anyway, MCPS partnered with this company called Wireless Generation. You can find them easily on the internet, and they're now owned by News Corp, right? Wireless Generation. Anyway, we've never been able to actually determine how much money is, what the contract calls for in terms of revenue coming in, because they redacted all that information from the information they gave us.
The reason I brought it up is that some of that 175 might be that kind of activity too. So we don't know.
We can't tell. I mean, it's, you know, from the budget here. And we can't tell by submitting MPIA requests either. Some other things. They do note in here, I don't know how many people have actually gone and read this in detail. They've done some things that I'm not going to say they're good, bad, but just interesting here. And it's, back in December 2011, they moved the data center from Carver Educational Services Center to 45 West Goody Drive in Rockville. Agnes was telling me she believed that's where Comcast used to, the previous Comcast facility.
Right.
So that, according to what they've written here, that'll basically summarize what they say here. That's going to increase reliability. They've put in UPSs, a generator,
Yeah,
or so forth.
they created their own data center.
Created their own data center. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Did it make it? Well, how?
Not in today's environment, it goes on the cloud at half the cost.
Teachers use
what I do.
One of the other things they mentioned here is that it says new financial management software will be implemented in schools for managing schools' independent activity funds. Now, for those who aren't aware of what the independent activity fund is, that's like when you pay a fee to the school, whether it's for
1 minute.
Okay. Yeah. Wait. Eileen, 1 minute left. All right.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. This will almost be the last thing I'll talk about, because I think it's simple. When you pay a fee to your school, for like just about anything, okay, that goes into this thing called the independent activity fund, or at least it's supposed to, and that could be like buying a yearbook, be a prom fee, a dance fee, and a fee for art. Fee for an art class, which really those are illegal, but they still charge them. Okay, a fee for a home ec class is supposedly to pay for food or whatever. That all goes to this thing called the independent activity fund. Well, it says here that this secure online system, this new one, will allow parents to view their students' financial account history. Well, let me let you look at your own student's financial account history. It still won't let you look at the independent activity fund overall. If you want to get that information, you got to go to the library. It's the media center in the school, and the IAF annual financial report and documents are supposed to be in the media center of each school. Now, when I've called around to various schools to get them, sometimes they're there, and sometimes they're and sometimes they're not, and they say, "Well, we'll get them for you," and it's like, "Wow, how dare you even ask?" But anyway, so it's like a little tiny bit a step in the right direction.
Is there an audit required? No?
Yeah, there is an audit. Okay, the IAF audits are done for high schools once a year, for middle schools every 18 months, and for elementary every 2 years. Those audits previously were until about 5 years ago, hardly anybody even knew they existed. And then the Parents Coalition actually requested them and started putting them up on the Parents Coalition website. And then finally, after continuing pressure for years and years, MCPS has finally started to put some of those audits up on the MCPS website, the internal audits. And a lot of times those audits have exposed like massive violations of the spending rules for the IAF fund. They've been used for like teacher gifts, loans to employees, all sorts of violations. They are all out there. You think, well, he must be making this up, but it's true. It's all.
The golf cart.
The golf cart from one school for the principal to drive around and so forth. So I urge you to it's in the in that same section where there's like schools at a glance and all. There's the audit reports. Okay, so I think my time is up. I could go on for another hour, but I won't. Thank you.
Bob Dennis is going to do chapter 10.
Well, I can only go on for about a minute. I've got Chapter 10, the Office of Human Resources and Development. It's a budget of 17.3 million. It's not going up or down significantly. The only notable office budget change is a reduction of $500,000 in the cost of partnering with university teacher training programs, which is sort of like an intern program for new teachers or for potential new teachers, and gives MCPS a look at possible new hires. The office does hiring, workforce management, various compliance functions, and it fosters professional growth for teachers. Three quarters of that budget, that 17.3 million budget, goes to support the existing workforce, including certification, training, and further education for staff. But half of that further education for staff is funded by the feds under Title IIA of No Child Left Behind. The total budget for this office is about 0.9% and falling of total employment costs for MCPS. That's retirement, that's salaries, wages, and the item labeled, I don't know what it's called anyway. It's the one with the retirement in it. So that less than 0.25% of that budget less than 1% of total employment costs is spent on hiring. Although there's about 6% annual turnover in teachers, so very little amount, very small amount is spent on hiring. The low cost of hiring suggests that MCPS is a very attractive place for teachers to work. However, once hired, it seems to me rather a modest commitment to further investment in the workforce.
Yes,
In the last chapter, air pencil, the Board of Education and the Office of the Superintendent.
Oh yeah, the bellies of bees, I guess. Yeah, this is actually a very simple, chapter to go through, because all the other bloat and everything else is enough. Because really, this is the office just for the support folks for the Board of Education, mostly administrative secretaries, that push the paper for the board. You've got the superintendent and his chief of staff and the assistants from there. You have the Office of Communications, which does website, email, all that, and everything else, communication. And then you've got a portion of that, which is the television fund, the independent fund. The budget is for this year, for all of that, total, is just slightly over $5 million. And it's about an 8.8% increase from last year. Most of that increase is due to salary. 91% of that increase is due to salary. Most of that is the following. You've got, well,
You can erase that.
yeah, gone with that. Why don't we have a political medium this year?
I know.
Right now you have 41 FTE, and it's going up to 45. 3 of those are the interesting ones, and then there's one communications assistant over in the Department of Communications. A poor photographer got realigned, and a position, and there was some tinkering around. They tinkered around with the contract money, so the photography was going to be contract, and they brought on a communications assistant in that department. Also, FYI, there's an increase in the contracting from 90,000 to 120,000. 30,000 of that is to closed caption videos. All the videos that they put up everywhere all have to be closed captions, so they're going to be doing a private vendor for that. Now, the 3 FTE here is in the superintendent's office, and this is for legal services, as was mentioned in chapter 5, I think.
Yes, special education.
Special education. So they are moving. They're spending about, as far as I can figure out, about $250,000, $275,000 to bring on a senior attorney, a paralegal, and a legal secretary. Now, I'm not exactly sure of the nomenclature of the board, of the budget, but it seems like if you're going to call somebody a senior attorney, you're planning on hiring junior attorneys. But right now, this is 3 slots, and that's the biggest jump. If you take that out of what you consider the budget increase, it's actually pretty much inflation. There's really not much that really changes in there. Slightly more for travel, like $1,800, and then the $30,000 for the closed captioning. The rest of it would be step increases for the support folks. But yeah, when I looked at it, the most interesting thing to me was bringing some of the legal service in house, which would be a definite change from what they
Board of
had.
Education salaries are in here.
Well, I don't see the actual board members. I think can come out of the state. I couldn't find actual board salaries. I think
No.
they're actually paid by Maryland.
No.
The support. No, if you look at the budget, they might be somewhere else, but there is no line item for.
Board members also get health insurance.
Well, that's I don't know if that's.
Yeah, but you wouldn't see
I don't
that.
see
That'd
that
still be
reflected in there.
Huh?
That'd be
I don't
chapter 8.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be reflected in that because I don't see a line item that says Board of Education members. What you see in here under Board of Education is
Why wouldn't the
You've
salaries
got,
be?
you've got chief of staff ombudsman for one, staff assistant policy communications, staff assistant legislative and intergovernmental relations, administrative services manager, administrative secretary, administrative secretary, administrative secretary two. That's all you have under the Board of Education operating budget. I did not research this because I thought that. My thinking is that since the board is technically a state body,
Well, so is teachers, they're state employees.
that I can see them being
No.
board paid. They're not paid out of the line item, it's there.
The
Well, then
board's-
it's somewhere.
The board's compensation is set by the legislature, though.
Yeah, it's up by the legislation. It's actually a state board. I mean, you're locally elected
So I don't
state
know where their
board.
money comes from, but it
So-
might be.
But they get health benefits.
Well, that's different. Yeah, they
Yeah,
do.
that can be
And they also
different
have
than the
American
board.
Express cards, but.
Yeah,
that's-
there's that. But really, you know, it's getting late, but really the interesting thing is the legal services and trying to bring, you know, and like I said, I think when you see a term senior attorney, I think they might be thinking sort of building it out over time, and you start with somebody you call a senior, and then you're gonna slide in some other folks over time. Otherwise, other than that, I mean, there's not any really significant difference from the actual FY13 to FY14. It's just frictional. So.
How much is it exactly? I mean, the amount for the salaries for the?
The amount for salaries total for everybody is, a little spreadsheet here, where's that number? Salaries for everybody in the in the 2014 proposed budget is $4,256,190.
For 41 people.
For 41 people, that comes out to
41 or 45?
45 or
45 FTEs.
45?
Yeah,
A little less than 100,000.
yeah. So that's it's around there. I think if I take that number around, I must have gotten that out. Yeah, it's actually, well, I have it down, superintendent, yeah, that's it.
Well, could the board salaries be in the FTEs?
Not according to the descriptions that are in the budget. I have a sense that they're paid out of the state budget, that the money gets to stay with state employees.
But it's a good question, and that's what we can't, a lot of the stuff we just can't tell from looking at the
Yeah,
budget.
but the average person doesn't know they get health benefits. That was only instituted like 3 years ago.
Right. But I mean, you can't tell any of that from reading this document, is what I'm saying. You know,
Yeah, it's
this
hard
is
to
not
do.
a document that really gives you the whole picture. It's not a well-written book.
The book is definitely written to be difficult to analyze.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks to everybody that